My hands were shaking as I pushed open the heavy glass door of the conference room, the sound of my father's voice still echoing behind me like thunder across the Aegean. Alexandros, come back here this instant. We are not finished discussing your engagement to the Venetoulas girl, but I couldn't breathe in that suffocating room anymore, surrounded by mahogany tables and the smell of expensive cigars. Talking about my life like I was just another business transaction to be closed. I am Alexandros Stavrakis, and for 32 years, I've been living someone else's dream. My father, Dimitrios Stavrakis, owns half the luxury hotels scattered across the Greek islands, and my mother, Athena Stavrakis, controls the other half of our social obligations. Together, they've orchestrated every moment of my existence since I could walk, from Swiss boarding schools to Oxford University, from perfectly curated social events to now, apparently, my marriage to some heiress I've met exactly 3 times. The September heat hit my face as I stumbled out of our family's flagship hotel in Oia, the Stavrakis Grand, with its infinity pools and gold-plated elevators that I'd grown to despise. Have you ever felt trapped in paradise? Because let me tell you, when paradise is your prison, even the most beautiful sunset feels like a cage. The tourists were everywhere, snapping photos of the iconic white buildings cascading down the cliffs, completely unaware that the man walking past them was falling apart inside. His perfectly tailored Armani suit. I needed to get away from everything that screamed Stavrakis Empire, the logo on every surface, the staff bowing and scraping, the constant reminder that I was more valuable as a brand than as a human being. My feet carried me through the narrow cobblestone streets of Oia, past the jewelry shops and art galleries that catered to cruise ship passengers, deeper into the maze of traditional Cycladic architecture, where my family's influence couldn't follow. That's when I saw it. A tiny cafe tucked between a vintage bookstore and a shop selling hand-painted ceramics. The sign read Alea in simple blue letters, and something about its understated charm called to me. No gold trim, no marble columns, no velvet ropes, just weathered blue shutters and the gentle sound of traditional Greek music drifting through. An open window, I could smell coffee. Real coffee, not the overpriced designer blends served in our hotel restaurants, mixed with the aroma of fresh pastries and something else, something that made my chest tighten with a memory I couldn't quite place. The door chimed softly as I entered, and I found myself in a world that felt like stepping back in time. Mismatched wooden tables, hand-embroidered tablecloths, and photographs of old Santorini covering the walls before the tourists, before the luxury developments, when this was just a fishing village where people knew each other's names. The afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, casting gentle shadows across the terracotta floor. And then I looked toward the counter, and my entire world stopped. She was bent over an espresso machine, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun with a few rebellious curls framing her face. She wore a simple white apron over a flowing blue dress, and when she moved, there was a grace about her that made everything else fade into background noise. But it wasn't just her beauty that made my heart race. It was the devastating familiarity of every gesture, every angle of her profile. Eleni, I whispered, and the name felt like a prayer I'd been trying to remember for 15 years. She must have heard me, because she looked up, and when our eyes met across that small cafe, I watched her face go through the same shock, the same recognition, the same impossible mix of joy and pain that was tearing through my chest. Her hand froze on the espresso machine handle, and for a moment that lasted forever, We just stared at each other like we were seeing ghosts. Eleni, my first love, my first heartbreak, my first taste of what it felt like to be truly alive. The girl who had vanished from my life 15 years ago without explanation, leaving me to search every corner of Athens until I finally accepted that she was gone. The woman who had haunted my dreams ever since, who made every other relationship feel like a pale imitation of real love. Alexandros, she said, and her voice was exactly the same, soft, melodic, with that slight rasp that used to drive me crazy when she whispered my name in the dark. But there was something different in her tone now, something guarded and cold that felt like a wall slamming down between us. I walked toward the counter on unsteady legs, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the cafe could hear it. Eleni, I can't believe, after all these years. What are you doing here? She straightened, composing herself with visible effort, and suddenly she was all business, wiping down the counter, avoiding my eyes, treating me like any other customer. Can I help you with something? The formality in her voice hit me like a slap. This was the woman who used to trace patterns on my chest while we talked about our dreams until dawn, who used to laugh until she cried at my terrible jokes, who used to look at me like I was her entire universe. Now she was asking if she could help me like I was a stranger. Help me, I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. Eleni, it's me. It's Alexandros. Don't you remember, ... I remember everything. She cut me off, and there was steel in her voice now. The question is, what do you want? Coffee, pastry, because that's all I'm serving here. I felt like she'd just punched me in the gut. What I want. Eleni, you disappeared. One day we were making plans for our future, and the next day you were gone. Your apartment was empty. Your phone was disconnected. Even your friends at university said they hadn't heard from you. I looked for you everywhere, I thought. I thought something terrible had happened to you. For just a second, I saw her mask slip. Pain flashed across her features, raw and real, before she caught herself and rebuilt that wall. That was a long time ago, Alexandros. We were different people then. Before I could respond, the door chimed again, and a small voice called out, Mama, I've finished my homework. Can I have some milk and cookies? I turned toward the voice and felt my breath catch in my throat. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, came running into the cafe with a school bag bouncing on her shoulders. She had Eleni's graceful movements and gentle smile, but her eyes were a startling shade of blue that I recognized immediately, because I saw them in the mirror every morning. Sophia, sweetheart, we have a customer, Eleni said, moving quickly to intercept the girl, but not before I got a good look at her face. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her nose, the curve of her lips, even the way she tilted her head when she was curious. Sorry, Mama, Sophia said, then looked at me with those impossibly familiar blue eyes and smiled. Hello. Are you here for Mama's famous galactoborica? She makes the best in all of Santorini. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. This beautiful, bright little girl was looking at me with such innocent friendliness, completely unaware that my entire world had just shifted on its axis. Those eyes, that smile, the way she moved her hands when she talked, it was like looking at myself as a child. If I had been raised with love and laughter, instead of expectations and obligations. She's mine, isn't she? I whispered after Sophia had skipped away to the back room, and my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Eleni's composure finally cracked. Tears sprang to her eyes, and she pressed her hand to her mouth as if she could hold back the truth. "Alexandros, please, ... Isn't she?" I demanded, louder now, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. "That little girl who just called you?" "Mama, she's my daughter." The devastation in Eleni's eyes told me everything I needed to know. We arranged to meet that evening at the lighthouse ruins, away from curious ears and innocent questions. The hours until sunset felt like an eternity, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd discovered. I had a daughter. For 8 years, somewhere on this island was a little girl who was mine, and I'd never even known she existed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I found Eleni sitting on the ancient stone wall of the lighthouse ruins, her dark hair whipping in the ocean breeze. She looked younger in her simple sundress, more like the girl I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But her eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there in our youth. "Tell me," I said, settling beside her, but careful to leave space between us. "Tell me what happened. Tell me why you left." And so she did. The story that poured out of her was more devastating than anything I could have imagined. 3 days before she disappeared, my mother had come to see her, not to offer congratulations or welcome her into the family, but to destroy her life with calculated precision that took my breath away. "She offered me money at first," Eleni said, her voice barely audible over the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. "A lot of money. Enough to finish my education anywhere I wanted. Enough to buy my parents a new house. Enough to give my family security they'd never dreamed of. All I had to do was disappear from your life and never contact you again. You didn't take it," I said, because I needed to believe that much of our love had been real. "No," she said quietly, "I didn't take it. I told her that you and I loved each other, that we were talking about marriage, that no amount of money could make me walk away. From that, I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a nightmare that made me sick to my stomach. When bribery failed, my mother had resorted to threats, photographs of Eleni's family taken without their knowledge, detailed plans for how she could destroy their livelihoods with a few phone calls. Her father's fishing license could be revoked. Her mother could lose her job at the local school. Her little brother's scholarship could disappear overnight. She made it very clear that if I told you what she'd done, if I tried to warn you about the kind of people your parents really were, she would carry out every single threat she'd made against my family. Eleni continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. The only way to protect them was to disappear completely and make sure you never found me. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so ugly I could barely stand to look at it. That's why you left without explanation. That's why you changed your phone number. Why you moved out of your apartment. Why even your professors said they didn't know where you'd gone. Your mother was very thorough, Eleni said bitterly. She had already arranged for me to transfer to a university in northern Greece, far enough away that you'd never accidentally run into me. She had already found me a job and a place to live. She had already made sure that anyone you might ask about me would be told that I'd simply decided to pursue other opportunities. I was pacing now, my hands clenched into fists, rage and helplessness warring in my chest. 15 years I'd wondered what I'd done wrong, what I could have said differently, how I could have fought harder to keep the woman I loved. Now I knew the truth. There had been no fight I could have won, because I'd never even known there was a war being waged. But you could have told me, I said desperately. Later, after you were safely away, you could have found a way to contact me, to explain what had happened. Eleni's laugh was sharp and bitter. Would you, really? Alexandros, you were 23 years old, completely dependent on your parents for everything. What exactly could you have done against people with that kind of power and that kind of ruthlessness? The worst part was that she might have been right. At 23, I'd been idealistic enough to believe that love was all we needed, but naive enough to have no real understanding of how the world actually worked. "There's something else," Eleni said quietly, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. "Something I haven't told you yet." I braced myself for another revelation that would shake everything I thought I knew about my life. What? I was already pregnant when your mother came to see me. The words hit me like a lightning bolt. I actually staggered backward, my mind reeling as I tried to process what she'd just said. You were. When she threatened your family, when she forced you to leave, you were already carrying my child. 2 months along, Eleni confirmed. I hadn't told you yet because I was scared, because we were so young and still in school, because I wasn't sure how you'd react. I was planning to tell you that night at dinner, actually. I'd finally worked up the courage. The dinner I'd planned to propose at, the night that was supposed to change everything. If my mother hadn't interfered, that evening would have been the most important of our lives. I would have asked Eleni to marry me, and she would have told me we were going to have a baby. Did she know? I asked. When my mother threatened your family, did she know you were pregnant? No, Eleni said quickly. I didn't tell her. I was afraid that if she knew about the baby, she might. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The implication was clear and horrifying. So you left, I said, the full scope of the tragedy finally becoming clear to me. You left to protect your family, and you raised our daughter alone because you were afraid of what my mother might do if she found out about her. We talked for hours on those ancient stones, about Sophia's childhood that I'd missed, about the woman Eleni had become, about the 15 years of separation that had shaped us both in ways we were only beginning to understand. She told me about Sophia's first steps, her love of books and science, her curious nature that reminded Eleni so much of me. Each detail was a gift and a wound. Something precious I'd been denied by my family's cruelty by the time the stars were bright overhead. We'd made a tentative agreement. I could meet Sophia the next morning at the beach, introduced as an old friend from university. If things went well, if she liked me and I proved I could be trusted, we would slowly build toward telling her the truth about who I was. But first, I had to confront my parents. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia's face, those blue eyes that were so unmistakably mine, that bright smile that had no idea her world was about to change forever. And every time I tried to rest, I heard Eleni's voice telling me about the threats my mother had made, the calculated cruelty that had torn apart the only real love I'd ever known by dawn. I'd made my decision. I was done being the obedient son, done letting my parents orchestrate my life like I was just another business asset to be managed and deployed for maximum profit. It was time for them to learn that their actions had consequences, that the young woman they'd terrorized 15 years ago had been carrying their granddaughter when they forced her to disappear. I found my parents having breakfast on the terrace of their penthouse suite, the morning sun casting golden light across the infinity pool and the breathtaking view of the caldera. They looked so normal, so civilized, sitting there in their designer clothes and discussing their plans for the day. You would never guess that these were people capable of destroying lives with a few phone calls. We need to talk, I said without preamble, my voice cutting through their cheerful morning chatter like a blade. All three of us, right now. "Good morning to you too, son," my father said, looking up from his financial reports. "Is there something urgent that couldn't wait until after breakfast?" "Yes," I said, moving to stand where I could see both of their faces clearly. "It's about Eleni Papadopoulos." The effect of that name was immediate and telling. My mother's face went completely white, and she nearly dropped her tablet. My father's expression shifted from mild curiosity to something much more wary and calculating. They knew exactly who I was talking about, and their reactions told me everything I needed to know about their guilt. "I know everything," I said. "I know about the threats you made against her family. I know about the photographs you showed her. I know about how you forced her to disappear from my life by terrorizing a 21-year-old girl who had never done anything wrong except fall in love with your son, Alexandros. I think you need to calm down and think carefully about what you're saying," my father said, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "I need to calm down." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mother, you threatened to destroy an innocent family because you didn't approve of who I was dating. You hired people to take surveillance photos of a fisherman and his wife and their children. You terrorized a young woman who was pregnant with your grandchild." "Pregnant?" my mother whispered, and I saw genuine shock in her eyes. "She was pregnant?" "Yes," I said, watching both of their faces carefully. "She was 2 months pregnant with my daughter when you forced her to leave. My daughter, who is now 8 years old and has been growing up without her father because of what you did." The silence that followed was deafening. My father was staring at me like I'd just announced that I was planning to give away the family fortune to charity, and my mother looked like she was about to faint. "You have a granddaughter," I continued, my voice growing stronger as I watched them struggle to process this information. "Her name is Sophia, and she's beautiful and brilliant and kind. And she's been asking her mother about her father for years without knowing that he was being kept from her by his own family." What followed was exactly what I'd expected. My parents trying to spin the situation to their advantage, talking about handling this development, suggesting financial support while maintaining that Eleni was still unsuitable as a partner for me. They spoke about my daughter like she was a problem to be managed rather than a human being they'd just learned existed. "Even if there is a child, even if she is yours, that doesn't change the fact that this woman is completely unsuitable as a partner for you," my father said bluntly. "We can arrange for financial support, make sure the child is properly cared for, but marriage is out of the question. You think you can just write a check and make this go away like you did 15 years ago?" I stared at him in disbelief. "We can discuss custody arrangements," my mother added, as if she was being incredibly generous. "If you want to be involved in the child's life, I'm sure we can work out something reasonable. But Alexandros, you have to understand that this doesn't change your obligations to this family, legitimate heirs." I was shouting now, past caring. Who might hear me? "Sophia is my legitimate heir. She's my daughter, my flesh and blood. And if you think I'm going to treat her like some dirty secret while I marry some heiress I don't love, you're completely insane." The argument escalated from there, 15 years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. I told them exactly what I thought of their methods, their values, their complete lack of basic human decency, and finally, when they continued to treat this as a business problem to be solved rather than a family to be embraced, I made the choice I should have made years ago. "Then maybe it's time I gave it all back," I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge, and I watched my parents' faces as they processed what I'd just said. My mother actually took a step backward, as if I'd physically struck her. "You don't mean that," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. I do mean it, I said, and as I spoke the words, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I mean every word of it. I don't want your money or your business or your social connections if they come with the price of abandoning my daughter and the woman I love. You're talking about walking away from €1 billion empire, my father said incredulously. I'm talking about choosing love over money, I corrected. I'm talking about choosing my own family over the one that raised me. I'm talking about finally becoming the man I should have been 15 years ago. I left them there on the terrace, surrounded by their beautiful things and their carefully constructed world, and went to pack my belongings. I would find my own place, something simple and honest, somewhere Sophia could visit without being overwhelmed by the kind of ostentation that had suffocated me my entire life. The legal arrangements were complex, transferring my assets, protecting myself and my new family from potential retaliation, making sure my parents couldn't use their resources to hurt Eleni or Sophia the way they had 15 years ago. But my oldest friend, Yanis, who also happened to be the family's head legal counsel, stood by me through every detail, helping me build the walls that would protect the people I loved. As the morning sun climbed higher over Santorini, I prepared for the most important meeting of my life, not a board meeting or a business negotiation, but a walk on the beach with an 8-year-old girl who didn't know I was her father. Eleni had said she would introduce me as an old friend from university, and we would see how it went from there. I changed out of my business clothes and into jeans and a simple shirt, clothes that felt more like me, more like the man I'd been. When Eleni loved me, then I walked through the narrow streets of Oya one more time, past the tourist shops and expensive restaurants, toward the small cove where my daughter was waiting. The path to the beach started behind the old church with the blue dome, just as Eleni had said. It wound down the cliff face, through wild olive trees and patches of oregano that filled the air with their Mediterranean fragrance. The morning was perfect. Clear blue sky, gentle breeze off the water, the kind of day that made you grateful. To be alive, I could hear them before I saw them, a woman's voice and a child's laughter echoing off the rocks. When I rounded the last bend in the path, there they were on the small pebble beach, Eleni in a simple sundress and Sophia in a bright yellow swimsuit, building an elaborate sandcastle near the water's edge. Sophia looked up when she heard my footsteps on the stones, and her face lit up with the same bright smile I'd seen in the cafe. "Mama, your friend is here." "Sophia, I'd like you to meet Alexandros," Eleni said, her voice carefully steady. "We went to university together in Athens, and he's visiting Santorini for a few days." "Hi, Alexandros," Sophia said, jumping up and brushing sand off her hands before offering me a small, formal handshake that made my heart clench. "I'm Sophia Papadopoulos. Did you really go to school with my mama? She's really smart. She knows everything about ancient Greek stories." "She is really smart," I agreed, accepting her handshake with the seriousness it deserved. "And yes, we studied together. She was the best student in our literature classes." "Do you know stories too?" Sophia asked, her blue eyes, my eyes bright with curiosity. "A few," I said. "Would you like to hear one while we work on your castle?" And just like that, I was sitting in the sand with my daughter, telling her the story of Perseus and Andromeda, while we built turrets and walls together. She listened with rapt attention, asking questions that showed she'd inherited not just my eyes, but my curiosity about the world. When I mentioned that Perseus had to be very brave to rescue the princess, She nodded solemnly. Mama says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, she said. It means you do the right thing, even when you are scared. I looked over at Eleni, who was watching us with tears in her eyes, and realized that our daughter had been raised by someone who understood courage better than most people ever would. Someone who had been brave enough to sacrifice everything to protect the people she loved. We spent the morning together, swimming in the crystal clear water, exploring tide pools, sharing the picnic lunch that Eleni had packed. Sophia chattered about school and her friends and her grandfather's fishing boat, painting a picture of a happy, normal childhood that filled me with gratitude and regret in equal measure. She was everything I could have hoped for in a daughter: intelligent, kind, funny, curious about the world around her. But it was the little things that broke my heart. The way she automatically helped her mother pack up the picnic. The way she carefully rinsed the sand off her toys before putting them away. The way she said please and thank you without being reminded. These were the habits of a child who'd been raised with love and attention, taught to be considerate and responsible, given the security of knowing she was valued and cherished. As the afternoon sun began to slant across the water, Eleni suggested it was time to head home. Sophia groaned dramatically but started gathering her things without argument, another sign of the good parenting she'd received. "Will I see you again?" she asked me as we climbed back up the cliff path. "Before you go back to Athens." I looked at Eleni, who gave me the slightest nod. "I hope so," I said. "If your mama doesn't mind, maybe I could come by the cafe tomorrow." "That would be great," Sophia said, then turned to her mother. "Can Alexandros have dinner with us, please? I want to show him my shell collection." Eleni's eyes met mine over Sophia's head, and I could see her weighing the request against all her fears and protective instincts. "We'll see," she said finally. "Let's take this one day at a time." As we reached the top of the path, Sophia surprised me by giving me a quick, spontaneous hug. "Thank you for the stories," she said, "and for helping with the castle. It was the best one I've ever built." She skipped ahead toward town, leaving Eleni and me to walk together in the golden afternoon light. For a few moments, we didn't speak, both of us processing what had just happened. "She likes you," Eleni said finally. "She's incredible," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Eleni, you've done such a beautiful job raising her. She's everything I could have dreamed of in a daughter." "Don't," she said quickly. "Don't get too attached too fast. This was just one afternoon. Being a parent is more than building sandcastles and telling stories." She was right, of course. I'd had a few hours of fun with Sophia, but Eleni had been there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee and hurt feeling for 8 years. I'd missed the hard parts, the daily grind of actual parenting, the endless worry and responsibility that came with raising a child. "I know," I said, "but I want to learn. I want to be there for all of it now. The good days and the difficult ones, the ordinary moments and the special occasions. I want to be her father in every way that matters, even if it means giving up everything else," Eleni asked. "Even if it means your family never forgives you for choosing us over them." I thought about my parents, probably still sitting on their terrace trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to their carefully ordered world. I thought about the business empire I'd walked away from, the social position I'd abandoned, the life of privilege I'd rejected. And then I looked ahead at Sophia, skipping along the path with her mother's grace, and my eyes, happy and secure, in the love that surrounded her. "I've already given up everything that matters," I said. I gave it up 15 years ago when you disappeared from my life. Everything since then has just been going through the motions, pretending to live while feeling dead inside. Finding you again, discovering that I have a daughter that's not losing everything. Eleni, that's getting everything back." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious. "This isn't a fairy tale, Alexandros. This isn't going to be easy. Your parents aren't going to just accept this and welcome us into the family. There will be complications, difficulties, probably more threats and attempts to control the situation. Let them try," I said. "This time, they'll be fighting me too. And I have something I didn't have 15 years ago. I have nothing left to lose. They already took away everything that mattered to me once. If they try to do it again, they'll discover that a man with nothing to lose can be very dangerous." We reached the edge of town as the sun was setting, painting the white buildings gold and casting long shadows across the narrow streets. Sophia was waiting for us by the café, sitting on the step and arranging her collected shells in careful patterns. "Mama, can I show Alexandros my room?" she asked as we approached. "I have books about Greek mythology that Papu gave me, and I want to see if he knows the same stories." Eleni hesitated, and I could see her internal struggle. Taking me to her home would be crossing another line, letting me further into their private world. But it would also be a sign of trust, an indication that she was willing to let this relationship develop naturally. "For a few minutes," she said finally, "but then it's time for dinner and homework." The apartment above the café was small but warm, filled with books and plants and the kind of comfortable clutter that spoke of a real life being lived. Sophia's room was a 80-year-old's dream, shelves full of books, a desk covered with drawings and craft projects, walls decorated with her artwork and photos of family and friends. "This is my favorite," she said, pulling a well-worn book of Greek myths from her shelf. "Papu, that's my grandfather. He reads to me from it every week. Do you know the story of Odysseus?" "I do," I said, settling cross-legged on her carpet. "It's one of my favorites too." We spent the next hour looking through her books, with Sophia testing my knowledge of various myths and legends. She was delighted to discover that I knew not just the popular stories, but some of the more obscure tales as well. And soon we were deep in a discussion about whether Athena or Artemis was the more powerful goddess. "You really do know a lot of stories," she said admiringly, "almost as many as Mama." From the doorway, I heard Eleni clear her throat. "Sophia, it's time for Alexandros to go. You still have homework to finish before dinner." "Oh, do I have to?" Sophia complained, but she was already putting her books away. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "If your mother says it's okay," I said, looking at Eleni for guidance. "We'll see," Eleni said, but her tone was softer now. "Say goodnight to Alexandros." Sophia surprised me again by giving me another quick hug. "Thank you for playing with me today," she said. "It was really fun." As I walked back toward my hotel through the darkening streets of Oja, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for a future that involved more than just going through the motions of a predetermined life. I had a daughter who was everything I could have dreamed of, and a woman who had loved me enough to sacrifice everything to protect our child. It wouldn't be easy. Eleni was right about that. My parents would fight this with every resource at their disposal, and there would be legal complications and social pressures and 1,000 obstacles I hadn't even thought of yet. But for the first time in my adult life, I was fighting for something that mattered, something worth any sacrifice. Have you ever been given a second chance at something you thought you'd lost forever? That's what this was. A chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. A chance to build a life based on love instead of obligation. A chance to finally become the man Eleni had believed I could be all those years ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to prove that I was worthy of the trust of the two most important people in my world. But tonight, I was content to walk through the ancient streets of Santorini, thinking about blue eyes and bright laughter and the possibility that sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, love really can conquer everything. The story was far from over in many ways. It was just beginning. But as I looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the strength that came from finally knowing who I was meant to be: Sophia's father, Eleni's partner, and for the first time in my life, truly myself.